Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jayapataka Swami Maharaj.
The following is a lecture given by His Holiness Jayapataka Swami on January 27, 1985 in Honolulu, Hawaii. The class begins with a reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 23rd chapter, 44th verse.
Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. After coming back to his hermitage, he divided himself, Kardama Muni, into 9 personalities just to give pleasure to Devahuti, the daughter of Manu, who was eager for sex life. In that way he enjoyed with her for many, many years, which passed just like a moment. Purport. Here the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu, Devahuti, is described as Surot Utsuka. After traveling with her husband all over the universe, in Mount Meru and the beautiful gardens of the heavenly kingdoms, she naturally became sexually stimulated. And in order to satisfy her sexual desire, Kardama Muni expanded himself into 9 forms. Instead of 1, he became 9. And 9 persons had sexual intercourse with Devahuti for many, many years. It is understood that the sexual appetite of a woman is 9 times greater than that of a man. That is clearly indicated here. Otherwise, Kardama Muni would have had no reason to expand himself into 9. Here is another example of yogic power. As the Supreme Personality of Godhead can expand himself in millions of forms, a yogi can also expand up to 9 forms, but not more than that. Another example is that of Sobhati Muni. He also expanded himself into 8 forms. But however powerful a yogi may be, he cannot expand himself into more than 8 or 9 forms. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, can expand himself into millions of forms. Ananta Rupa, innumerable, countless forms. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, no one can compare to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by any conceivable energetic manifestation of power. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport to text 44, chapter 23, canto 3 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the chapter entitled Devahuti's Lamentation. And now we're discussing the history of Kardama Muni, Devahuti, and ultimately the incarnation of Kapila Muni. As we remember that Kardama Muni had performed austerities for a long time. And finally Vishnu himself appeared, or was it Brahma, appeared to him and blessed him. And then Kardama Muni married the daughter. He did not feel ready to immediately take up renunciation. There was still some seed of desire in his heart, but he didn't want to get married except to someone who was going to be able to assist him in becoming Krishna conscious or God conscious. Didn't want to marry just anyone. Didn't want to fall down from the spiritual path. And the ultimate issue. So he had a blessing from Lord Vishnu to get Devahuti as a wife and to enjoy with her for some time, and then he would renounce, but that the Lord would himself become her son to give the transcendental science to the world of the past times, where Kardama Muni has taken Devahuti around the universe, showing through his mystic powers different aspects of the universe. And so now they're about to produce progeny. So they're enjoying their material happiness, sexual happiness in their Grihastha ashram. So there are many instructions contained within these pastimes. Of course, as we read on, we find out that in spite of, so nobody who can have a husband like Kardama Muni, especially in this Kali Yuga, who is able to take his wife not only to the movies or down to the drive-in or something in his Porsche. You see, Kardama Muni in a special airplane created from his mystic power took his wife all over the universe, showed her here's the heavenly planets, here's how the universe is set up, and then to give her a physical satisfaction, even expanded himself into 9 forms. So there's nobody, practically speaking, in this world today who's got that type of mystical power. It's still, at the very end, Devahuti was lamenting that actually she had failed to get from her husband spiritual knowledge. And so in the end, they both did tapasya together to get the Lord as their son. So although here it says, Muhurtavat, material happiness may occupy our time and make it go very quickly. But then we're still right back where we started from. It just passes the time very nicely. It may be able to satisfy one's urges temporarily. And so that's good if someone's really agitated by material desires, to experience what is the actual situation of material desire. What is its limitations? What is the extent of it? So here they're not leaving any stone unturned, so to speak. Within the regulative principles, they're fully experiencing material happiness in a bona fide way for a grihasta with the type of blessings and mystic powers that he has. But then, ultimately, of course, their goal is to become liberated. At least that was Devahuti's goal, and that is also his goal. So, obviously we can't imitate Kardama Muni in any respect. Similarly, we don't in our short life. They're living the lifespan of the demigods. So for them, many, many years is still just like only a few days as compared to us who are only living 60, 70, 80, 50 years or less. For us, a few years is a long time. It's a big percentage of our life. But for them, many years is nothing. Because they're living at that age, they're living in a totally different lifespan. Nonetheless, they're also trying to utilize the overall period of their life to become God conscious. So this is one of the reasons why a person enters Grihastha life. I remember once Srila Prabhupada asked me to leave the room. I was counseling one of his Grihasthas, and he gave some advice on how to practice a Grihastha life. He gave some book, different things. So, when one's in Grihastha life, there's a license for enjoying sense gratification. But on the ultimate issue, it's supposed to lead one to renunciation. One may directly enter renunciation, but that's very rare. Normally, the material desires plague one very strongly. And so, it is a safer way to enter into Grihastha life. If you have a desire for a progeny, to have followers, to have a family, then that can be dovetailed by being married and having children and raising those children in Krishna consciousness. In fact, in Sanskrit, the word putra or putri, the two names for son or daughter, means that the offspring or the put who can Putra, pu means hell and tra means to deliver. Putri, same thing, only in the feminine. So, someone who can deliver the parents. In this case, Devahuti's son was God himself. He was definitely capable of liberating everyone, what to speak of his parents. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had as his son Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Chaitanya Das had as his son Srinivas Acharya on the order of Lord Chaitanya. So sometimes even grihastas are given order to have a child by the Guru or by some great Vaishnava. And those children, the hope of the parent is that the child would be a transcendental personality. Of course, from this first connection, we'll find out that the offspring were girls. And then they did a special tapasya, a special penance, and later Lord Kapila, he came on his own free will. So, similarly, we should try to follow the overall life example of Kardama Muni and Devahuti when entering into the Grihastha ashram, never losing sight, you see, of the ultimate goal of becoming Krishna conscious. Since our lifespan is so short, therefore, if we were to completely engage in this type of activity as Kardama Muni and Devahuti did of sexual relations for many, many years, with no holes barred, so to speak, then, because of our lack of austerities, the chance of us totally forgetting spiritual life would be very, very great. The Kardama Muni for thousands of years had performed austerities. He had these mystic powers. So just like Bhima, he said it was too difficult for me to observe every Ekadasi. Just give me one Ekadasi once a year, I can just do it, do a super one. Because it's hard to keep track. And just he was more, not so much in the Brahminical mode, but more in the mode of passion, but a pure devotee, no doubt. So he got the benediction like what in India is the hottest day of the year, in the one month of May, that without water, without sleeping, 24 hours, continually just staying absorbed, chanting and fasting. And there's other, rules that are to be followed. Then he observed that, totally, Nirjala Ekadasi, known as the Pandava Nirjala Ekadasi. So then he said that, that's equal to 100 Ekadasi. So in case he missed any during the year, then it makes up for that. But then Kardama Muni, he didn't want to spend the whole life. His intention wasn't to spend the whole life in regulated grihastha life. He wanted to just experience all in just a few years and then get back. And then whatever was there, then go back totally into renunciation. Just get it over with. It was a little bit of a different kind of a situation. But he had that austerity behind him. Just like, for instance, there's a story about, it's not exactly the same, but there's a story about Shankara Acharya, that when he was preaching and defeating Buddhism, so there was this like a witch, she was like a mystically powerful yogini in the Buddhist religion, and he was having a debate with her. So she asked him some question. He had to defeat her in every respect in order to be able to establish his philosophy. That she asked him some question, which the only way he could know was if he was a grihastha, if he had experienced sexual life. But since the age of 9 he had taken sannyas, there was no way that he could know that. So he was in a hard put situation, according to this story, to be able to answer that particular question. So he went into samadhi, in meditation. He left his body in his spiritual form. And this at that time there was a king somewhere who was dying. So just after he left his body, he entered into the dead body. This mystic power brought it back to life. Nobody realized it was like a person sick, and just at the very moment he died, he went in. So everybody thought the king recovered. So then he went in, and he also enjoyed with the king's wife, experienced what was that situation, and then the king went and died. The whole time, Shankaracharya and somebody goes back in, then he defeats that woman and establishes Vedic culture there. Of course, Shankaracharya is the incarnation of Lord Shiva. But at that time, when they incarnate, it seems that they confined themselves to that particular experience as part of their pastime. It's something beyond our understanding how that happens. But sometimes these great yogis and munis, they do some amazing things. But unless we're able to take people around the universe and expand ourselves into 9 forms and so on, we shouldn't just imitate and think, all right, so now I'll just, for 5 years, we'll just have a total honeymoon, and then after that, we'll renounce or something like that. Because we don't have that type of austerity in this modern world behind. Rather, I think everyone's already done the opposite. In many cases, not everyone, but in many cases, the material world is already there enjoying totally, and then sometimes people are a little bit frustrated, they come, and others are coming just out of knowledge, some are coming out of distress. All different situations are there. So Prabhupada has given us the opportunity of practicing Krishna consciousness, that whether we're in the Grihastha ashram or whether we're in the renounced ashram, if we practice it perfectly, we can go back to Godhead at any time. This system is a little bit risky if in the middle of it one were to leave the body, then one would have a hard time going back to Godhead, because at that time the consciousness is absorbed in the mood of sense gratification. Ours, Kardama Muni took that risk, but as I say, he again had, at that time was a different age and people lived the total lifespan. He had the blessings of Vishnu behind him and great austerities, and he also had the benediction that he was going to have Vishnu as a son. Well, from this first attempt when only daughters were born, then the next time they were very careful to try to produce a son, and they're of course hoping that Vishnu would come in that next birth. So that's the basic kind of overview of the situation. The power of the yogis to expand themselves and do wonderful things. We can see that although these abilities are there, that ultimately the real thing is to connect with Krishna, who has got unlimited forms. Once we are reunited in our relationship as eternal servitor of Krishna, that is actually our complete perfection. And whether we have mystic power, at that time, of course, one gets the mystic power. Just like Narada Muni, he also said that when he went to see Krishna in Dwarka, he went to each of the palaces of Krishna. And in each of the palaces, he found Krishna was doing something totally different. So yogi may expand into 9 or 10 or 8, whatever it is, forms. But they only have one consciousness. It's not like one form is feeling happiness, another is feeling... They may have multiple sensual perception, but the consciousness is one. So like if one is feeling pain, that pain will be felt, by all, right? Because it's one common consciousness. It's just they're able to somehow expand into 10 forms, but they won't be feeling different emotions. Emotionally, there'll be one consciousness. Just like we have, of course, 2 arms, but most people are like right-handed or left-handed, and some drummers, they become, what do you call it? Ambidextrous, where they can play different beats with each hand. You see, which normally, it's like they're both working independently practically. So somehow they're able to do the similar type of thing where they're ambidextrous in each form, that each form can work simultaneously and do different things, but emotionally, the consciousness is still one person. When Krishna expands, each separate form is totally independent of the next, yet simultaneously the same. It's something which is totally inconceivable to even a great yogi, pure devotee, liberated, mystical, perfected person like Narada Muni. When he went around and saw Krishna laughing in one house, and then feeling very compassionate in the next house, and going in each one, displaying a totally different emotions. One place he's dressing up to go out and spy on, see what the citizens are thinking about what's going on. And one place he's, all the different kinds of pastimes are going on. Totally different from the next. Then he became totally amazed at the potency of Krishna. That how each of these forms is not like a yogi's expanding. He explained it, it's totally different. Krishna's, each expansion is full and complete. Well, the yogi's expansion is not actually independent of the others totally. They're not full and complete, separate entities. He's still one entity with nine. He isn't able to make 9 or whatever, 8 forms. But the expansions of Krishna, they're unlimited. And each unlimited form has got the total potentiality. You see, it's the difference between having a multi-user computer where you have multi-terminals and having, unlimited, separate, like what do you call those? Mainframes, computers. Each one has got the full potential, is not dependent on the other. So the yogi is kind of like a multi-terminal expansion. There's still one main, how do you say that, CPU, central processing unit, but it has multi-forms. Where Krishna, he's totally independent. Each form, each one is simultaneously as good as the next and able to manifest its own pastimes without any dependence on any other form. So that's pretty inconceivable how that could happen, but we can get just some kind of an idea that Krishna's potency is unlimited and the yogi's potency is limited. They don't have the same potency as Krishna, but they definitely have more potency than normal, conditioned human beings who haven't entered into the Brahminical culture. So rather than just trying to achieve that intermediate stage of just achieving mystic powers, which you can get automatically by being a pure devotee of Krishna, just like Narada Muni achieved. But Narada Muni, although he had those mystic powers, it wasn't that he needed to utilize them very often. You don't find, I don't know if there are any certain instances when Narada Muni felt the need for manifesting, although he mentioned he had them. Sometime he must have tried them out because he knew the difference between his mystic powers and Krishna's. We don't find that he needed them. He rather depended upon Krishna. In his preaching, he would travel around and he would be preaching, and whenever it was necessary for his particular service, he used his power of traveling. Apart from that, he didn't use very much his mystic powers, except in rare instances like when he gave Migrari the vision that what would happen to him in the future as the result of his karma and so on. So someone who is a pure devotee, they're given the mystic powers because they won't misuse them. They won't fall down even though they have them. And for some devotional service, sometimes they utilize them. But the yogis, sometimes they tend to, when they get mystic powers, to misuse them for sense gratification. And as such, sometimes they fall down from their platform. For instance, we find that in the life of Pandu, when he went into the forest hunting, there was a male and female deer having sexual intercourse, and at that time he shot the deer. It turned out that there were two husband and wife who through their austerities had achieved mystic powers, had turned themselves into the form of deer so that in public they could wander around in the forest and have sex, which they couldn't do in a human form because it wouldn't be appropriate at all. They want to maintain the Vedic standard. But unfortunately for them, they got killed. Of course, while they were dying, they cursed Pandu for shooting them in that state. In this way, sometimes we find that they get some mystic power and they use it for reasons which are not totally Krishna conscious. In the case of Kardama Muni, of course, as I said, it was a planned program. Just in a short time he wanted to finish off his material desires and then to totally renounce, and he was assured that he would get liberation in the end. So with that kind of assurance behind him, so he took this particular method. Some of the other, they get mystic power, they totally lose sight of going back to Krishna, and they get absorbed in material activities. And sometimes they don't recover. It delays them for a long time. So Brahmuni, due to offenses of Vaishnavas, he left his austerities and he also got married to 49 queens. I think he... And it took him... We don't hear after that exactly about his spiritual practice. It took a long time to recover for him. But definitely he was delayed for a long time. His fall down was due to offending Garuda. Therefore, we're advised not to desire mystic powers. Today in America, people seem to have be active exploring different forms of sense gratification. Some people are already tired of it. So now the movies are showing a trend towards mystic powers. The Force, so many other things. The people want to have mystic powers. These different movies that I hear about seem to be showing some kind of mystical things happening. So that's the normal trend. First one sense gratification in an ordinary way. Then to be able to have mystic powers, you can have sense gratification in a bigger way. Then the next stage after that is to want liberation. Some of the Buddhist yogis, they also get mystic powers. Therefore they're able to convince people. Normal people, if they see some mystic power, they become awestruck, and then they, just like the scientists have been able to convince the people by showing some unusual feats through scientific and technological advancements, and more or less they've awestruck the people by their almost mystical power. Now we think, well, it's not mystical, it's just a manipulation of matter and science. Also, mystical means what? It's nothing except also the manipulation of matter. It's just that through vibration, through certain austerities, Prabhupada said it's a mechanism. If you know the mechanics of it, you can do it. But to get that type of mental and psychic control, to know those subtle mechanics of the material world, it takes austerities, it takes practicing that type of yoga, or it takes the special mercy of Krishna. But it's a mechanical apparatus. It's just that modern science, they may discover some of the mechanics of it. The mystic yogis, they discover it coming from a different direction. So they're coming up from the gross material direction, they're coming down from the spiritual into the subtle world, and knowing how to manipulate matter from the causal region, coming down into the world of effect. Now modern science has found that mind over matter, that some people are able to move little corks in the water and make them go here and there just by their thought process. So like this, the yogis, their concentration is so intense, and they have the understanding how on the everything is coming down from the law of karma, from the causal plane into the phenomenal plane. And so they're able to utilize that science, the subtle science, and to manipulate matter. But it's the same thing, you're manipulating matter. No matter how much you manipulate matter, whether you move pebbles or whether you move mountains, you're not going to be any more spiritually satisfied. It's simply a type of extended form of sense gratification. Ultimate satisfaction comes when we realize our real constitutional position. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his followers are totally disinterested in mystical powers. In fact, sometimes Lord Chaitanya offered mystical powers to his devotees, practically as a test. But he offered that they could have. They didn't desire it. There's a story of Rasikanand, who was a disciple of Shyamananda Pandit. And that one time in Remuna, where Kirchur Gopinath is, he was sitting in the temple there. I haven't seen it written in a book, but this is what the local Pandits of that temple explain happened. There's a special shrine to commemorate this pastime. That some mystic yogi had come into the town and he was flying around on a branch. It seems since he was flying on a branch that he wasn't actually a mystical yogi in the normal sense of the sattvic Astanga yoga process, because if you need to fly around on a branch, it would indicate that he was following the more tantric method by worshipping demigods. They get to empower a branch. This is the original system. We know, of course, in Western history, the witches, they ride around on a broomstick or something. In India, they ride around upon a branch from a tree. So, it seems that whatever that ancient system was, we find that the gypsies in Europe, they speak a language which is mainly Sanskrit derivative. They can understand Bengali or Hindi if you speak to them. They say that. So it seems that a similar type of tantric science was being practiced in ancient 400 or 500 years ago all over the world, but originally came from India. So this yogi was flying around on a branch. We'll call him a yogi, or this mystic, whatever you want to call him. And all the villagers were just dumbfounded, because it's not the kind of thing you see every day. So they were overwhelmed. They ran to Rasikanand, who was their local Mahanta, their spiritual master, their spiritual guide. And they said, "You must come and see." They loved him as a Vaishnava. "You must come and see. This yogi is flying around on a branch. This is wonderful." Hey, he's brushing his teeth that time early in the morning. He said, "This is nothing to worry about. It's not important." No, he's flying. I tell you, it's nothing important. It's much more important to be Krishna conscious. No, he's flying. It's on a branch, no strings, nothing. So Rasikananda became very impatient. He took his twig. In India, they chew on a twig. Put it under his leg. He flew around the ashram 4 or 5 times, telling them, "I tell you, it's not important. You just be worried about being Krishna conscious." And he came back down, sat, and finished brushing his teeth. The villagers were amazed, They got the point. So many of our great acharyas had these powers. They didn't, because the people then, they won't be thinking how to be Krishna. They think how to fly. Right? And they'll be obsessed with that idea. And, if they die with that idea, then, they may become a bird or something. They'll become a mystic yogi it'll delay their spiritual progress. These mystic powers are simply a stall. In other ages, when you've got 10,000 or 100,000 years to work with, alright, so mystic powers, it's not that big a problem. But in this particular age, when you can die at any minute, when life is very short anyway, to be worried about these type of things, which are also very difficult to achieve because they are mechanical things. You have to, in the normal way of getting them, there's no guarantee that a person will get these powers. These TMers, they're doing this type of meditation to levitate, and practically speaking, because in spite of doing it for years together, they're normally able just to get up about a few inches, and they fall down. They have to put rubber cushions. They fall down on their face, so they have the rubber cushions so they don't break their neck. Because they can't follow all those systems. It's amazing, even in this age, they can do that much. And they can even bounce. But even if they could fly, it's not the goal. You see. So Kardama Muni, after even he had so many mystic powers, he engaged ultimately in Bhakti Yoga. Everyone who really knows the science of yoga knows that ultimately you have to go into Bhakti Yoga and understand your relationship with Bhagavan. This is the ultimate perfection. So Lord Chaitanya, he was so merciful that he didn't want to distract anyone. In spite of offering, even he offered devotees, they didn't accept. You see. Somehow if they had it, alright. But they didn't even bother to show it to people. You hardly find any example of showing any mystic power amongst Lord Chaitanya's followers. Rather, they avoided the public fanfare. They avoided that type of public exposure. And they're always preaching the glories of Krishna, chanting Hare Krishna. Even though they would easily get mystic powers. But what was the use of showing it? If people are all attracted just for those mystic powers, no one is going to just to be absorbed how to do this, how that. It'll be very hard to introduce Krishna consciousness to them. So, our process is not to try to achieve mystic power or even liberation, but to achieve pure Krishna consciousness. Now when we go back to Godhead, we leave this body. Now some people, they may immediately transfer. But we find in the teachings of the Goswamis, Prabhupada also mentioned that when we go back to Godhead, that if we have any desires, we get stuck up on that particular plane. So if you could imagine, we're going back from the earth planet and we're going past the heavenly planets. So in one planet there people all have mystic powers. In one planet there are all beautiful gardens and beautiful men and women and an ample opportunity for sense gratification. You see, by their traveling to the heavenly planets, it showed here even Devahuti and Kardama, they became sexually agitated. When there's a very nice environment, very comfortable, very beautiful, sometimes that creates more sex desire. So, as we're going back to the spiritual world, if we happen to go on a visual tour, sometimes the yogis want to see what the universe looks like, and so they go around and they see a few planets on their way back to Godhead. But there's a danger we'll get stuck up. If you think, oh, these mystic powers are far out, these are really nice, I'd like to have those. Alright, then the next thing you know is you're in Siddhaloka or Kinaraloka. If you think, oh, these gardens in the heavenly planets are really nice, I'd like to stay here for a while. You get to take birth in the heavenly planets. And if you go through all the different planets, but your actual desire is fixed, there's no Krishna here. Where's Krishna? Oh, I don't see Krishna here amongst the yogis. I don't see Krishna here amongst the heavenly planets. I don't see Krishna here in Shiva Loka. I certainly don't see Krishna here in this Brahma Jyoti. Where is Krishna? Oh, here is Vaikuntha Loka, but where is Krishna? Where are the cowherd boys? Where's Mother Yasoda? Where's Lord Chaitanya and his Sankirtan party? Here is Narada Muni's here, but here he's very formal with Narayan and 4 Kumaras are there and Jayapataka. Where's Gopal? Or where's Gauranga? If we have that type of desire, if we're already in that type of Sarupa Upalabdhi, where we identify directly in our relationship as a servant of Krishna, in his Gopala form, Radhamada form, or with Lord Chaitanya, then that takes us back to Golok Vrindavan. Anywhere along the way, where if we're attracted in the material world to Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, or to the majestic aspect in the spiritual world, or to merging into the Brahma Jyoti in the lower level than that, whatever it may be, we get stuck up there. For a pure devotee, they sometimes are able, after time, they're able to continue. But this is the thing. So right now we have the opportunity, through Srila Prabhupada's books, through this movement of Lord Chaitanya, of reawakening our original consciousness as a servant of the original form of Krishna. And that can take us right back to Krishna, right back to Godhead. Now, even if we get stuck up, as long as we practice devotional service, of course, Prabhupada assures that in the end, one again gets an opportunity to continue. Even you take birth in the heavenly planets. Again, when you take birth in the earthly planet, you are able to take up your devotional service by being born in a good family or suitable for taking up devotional service. But there are definitely risks involved. In fact, I've heard that one time Prabhupada said that he was expressing anxiety, that his devotees weren't concentrating enough upon being Krishna conscious. You see, if we don't have that mystic power like Kardama Muni to experience everything in one life, so somebody still has this unfulfilled desire to enjoy sense gratification, they may have to take birth in the heavenly planets. But then by the time you come back down to this earthly planet, Lord Chaitanya's movement wouldn't be here. His movement's here 10,000 years. What's 10,000 years in the heavenly planets? That's a few days. Nothing. There's a very great risk. You see, now we have this opportunity. It's just like when they advertise sale on between January 26th to 28th. Right? If you go now while the sale is on, now you stand every opportunity. Now is the chance. Now if we just absorb ourselves in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, you see, we just fall at the feet of Nitai Gaur and beg for their mercy. And somehow if they give us a drop of that spiritual ecstasy of pure love for Krishna, then immediately, without going through all these trials and tribulations, we can see that, this whole material world's happiness is just very insignificant compared to the joy, to the transcendental bliss of serving Krishna. And that's the best protection. You see, there's different ways of approaching it. One way is kind of through the school of hard knocks. And the other way is, alright, if you just, Lord Nityananda, give me a little drop of nectar. If you just flood me with so much happiness that I can't think anymore about anything else, that the material happiness no longer has any attraction for me because of you giving me the pure happiness of Krishna consciousness. You see, that is the best immunization. You want to get the vaccination from the material attraction. The best way is to get absorbed in transcendental ecstasy. And to do that, we have to have a very strong desire. In a few days or weeks or months or years, if we're very determined, and if we get that somehow or another, if we can just convince Lord Nityananda that we don't want anything else but that, he should please give us that little drop of mercy. Well, if somehow or another, because he's unlimitedly merciful, he doesn't consider that this person's qualified or unqualified, he's very liberal in giving that mercy. Well, if someone just has the desire for it, Lord Nityananda, he's been known to give. So it's very promising if we put our faith in Lord Nityananda, if we put our aspirations on his lotus feet to give that mercy. And if we get that, then after that it's smooth sailing. then material happiness does seem very insignificant. And all we have to do is just avoid too much association with materialistic things, which will somehow just bring us into some clouded condition where we forget our spiritual perspective and start acting just mechanically again on a material platform. You just have to avoid that type of situation. And all we have to do is just avoid too much association with materialistic things, which will somehow just bring us into some clouded condition where we forget our spiritual perspective and start acting just mechanically again on a material platform. You just have to avoid that type of situation and continually engage in devotional service. So with that little drop of nectar, that's what every devotee prays for. Kripa bindu diya. Give me that drop of mercy. That drop of mercy which is the mercy of Lord Nityananda. Guru is of course the representative of Lord Nityananda. He can also request Lord Nityananda to give that mercy. And so when we get that, then we don't have to go through so many material experiences and become renounced and detached and then engage in devotional service and austerities and that kind of more tedious way. Directly, we can be very fixed up on the spiritual platform by achieving that ecstasy of devotional service. We get a little taste of it in our kirtans, sometimes in devotional service. We get a little glimpse of that transcendental happiness, and that is enough, of course, to give us even more enthusiasm. And if we totally desire that mercy from Lord Nityananda, why wouldn't He give? He's so merciful. He gave Jagai Madai, and they didn't even have a desire for it. If we have a desire for it, then why wouldn't He give us the mercy? So we should fix our mind, not for any material reason we want the spiritual happiness, but just so that our mind is totally fixed. Because we know that, like little children, always looking, where's the sweet, where's something to eat, they're a little restless. Like this, our mind is immature, it's a little restless. It gets disturbed sometimes by material allurements. How is it going to be possible to satisfy the mind and senses? We know it's not possible by material means, and we lack sometimes the determination to do it spiritually. So the only hope for us is to get the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, the Panchatattva. Because by their mercy, then immediately we can be absorbed in transcendental bliss, and then that's our best immunization. The only thing that can potentially drag us down from that transcendental platform is if we commit offenses to the Vaishnavas, or if we're careless and inadvertently we allow weeds to grow up. So, this is the system Lord Chaitanya has given. It's definitely the most shortcut. You simply be absorbed in transcendental ecstasy. And this way, you don't have to go through this type of material sense gratificatory distractions. One can very simply practice their Krishna consciousness and then go back to Godhead. That's the unlimited mercy of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to bring us the mercy of Lord Nityananda here in the Western world where people are far removed from spiritual life. So He gave the process, chant Hare Krishna, dance in ecstasy, feast. And by people, they didn't even know the philosophy, didn't know anything. They weren't even following any principles, but by chanting and feasting on Krishna Prasadam and dancing while chanting Hare Krishna, they started to feel transcendental happiness. And having felt transcendental happiness even a little bit, even for a few moments, then their mind became fixed. Oh, this is something really wonderful. And then they start reading the books and they become... So our process is somehow or another to get people to chant, get them to dance, get them to take Krishna Prasadam. Those who are, you see, the general people, they're not really philosophically inclined nowadays. Those who are, of course, let them come and we'll can deal with them philosophically. But generally our process is to just somehow or another engage people in devotional service. By that they become purified and they taste some spiritual peace of mind, happiness, ecstasy in some cases. And then once they feel a very strong connection with Krishna through those different types of practices, then we teach them how to avoid weeds and offenses, how to maintain their devotional service through the process of regulative principles or sadhana. And once they achieve then a very fixed state of experiencing transcendental bliss, then their responsibility is to carry out the order of the spiritual master. Of course, externally, they'll always engage in chanting and hearing and devotional practices to show a good example to others. But their primary duty at that time then is fulfilling the order of the spiritual master over all other duties. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrindo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Any questions?
Are there any planets? Are any of the demigods?
Well, they're all devotees.
Well, what's the...
They're called Sakam Bhaktas. I mean, they're devotees, but they have material desires. Niskam and Swakam. Those who have desires, they go to the heavenly planets. Anyone in the heavenly planets is a devotee. Deva means you're a devotee of Vishnu. If you have material desires, you're not a devotee, then you go to those places in the lower planets where there are also sense gratification, but they're not devotees.
Well, why can't they go back to Godhead from the heavenly planets? Why do they have to come back here and then go back from here?
Well, it's been described in different ways. One is that when you're in the heavenly planets, the comforts and the sense gratification is so all-pervasive that one doesn't really feel the urgency. One doesn't feel that type of intense need for engaging in self-realization. It's just like you find it's more difficult to preach, say, to Americans than people in the third world, possibly because they have enough money, they're a little more proud, self-reliant. But when they're poor, even when you do Sankirtan, I've heard many times that it's actually the poor people are easier to approach, even though they don't have money. They're easier to approach. They're not by sense gratification, person becomes a little bit proud, become a little bit aloof. So you can imagine in the heavenly planets, you have a situation where there's practically no suffering. Practically, the only in Janaloka, like the suffering they experience is they see that in other planets people are suffering and they feel bad about it. And you go higher up than that, and then they're even further removed from the suffering. So, in that environment, to become Krishna conscious, it requires a long time of meditation, different things. And there are those who do that. But normally, to go back from the heavenly planets, then they'll start planet hopping. They'll start to, by their austerities, go up to Brahmaloka, Satyaloka. And then they'll stay with Lord Brahma. Now, when Lord Brahma dies, and he lives a long time, when he goes back, then those people with him on his planet, they get to go back. So at that time, many of the siddhas and others who have mystic power, they try it at the last part of the universe to get up to Satyaloka. And those who make it, they home base. They get to go back to Godhead. But those who don't make it, then they have to wait till the next creation of the material universe. So that way is is something far in the future. We know that even when Lord Brahma goes to sleep at night, that the residents of the Satyaloka, Narada Muni explained that he was in the body of Vishnu, but he was conscious for those millions of years. It just went very quickly for him. And then again they came out. He didn't lose his consciousness. But from this earthly planet, the facility of going back to Godhead at the end of life, this is like the special loophole. That as a human being, there's not so much sense gratification. There's not a little suffering. You can see suffering. If you're not even experiencing it so much, you can see it. It's there in the world, right before your eyes. And most people experience some suffering, especially now in Kali Yuga. Similar, but there's not so much suffering that even amongst the suffering there's some happiness. Like I said, in the hellish planet, it's so hellish that it's just so horrible that you can't think about sense. You just want to get out of that place, and you can't concentrate upon sadhana or some kind of spiritual practices so much. It's very difficult. It's just too hellish. The pain is just too great. So this is described as the ideal place for going back to Godhead. Now Krishna said if anybody remembers Krishna at the time of death, they'll come to him, no matter where they are. But we're advised that in the heavenly planets, apparently they don't always think about Krishna because of the sense gratification. They get distracted. Where if we are Krishna conscious in this planet, well, it's a good opportunity to remember Krishna and go back. If you remember Krishna at the time of death, you go to him. If you're thinking of something else, you go there. It's a universal. Krishna wasn't speaking for one country or one person or one place. He's speaking as universal. So, and then the demigods, they live for a long time. So at the end of their life, if they think of Krishna, they can go back. It's just that apparently there's dangers, and you have to live a long time. It's a long time in a very comfortable situation. So it's advised that, in fact, the demigods, they prefer taking birth here to practice the devotional service. Especially they're crying to be here when Lord Chaitanya's movements, because in such a short time you can go back to Godhead. I don't know if they answered it.
Jara, you're talking about how a yogi can expand himself 9 times. But what about a pure Vaishnava? I don't know if Kardama Muni was on that platform or not. But a pure Vaishnava, can a pure Vaishnava expand himself more than 9 times? Just like if there's a pure devotee and he's being worshipped, and his murti is on the altar, and we understand that he's not different than that murti. Say there's 100 or 1,000 murtis. Does that mean that that pure devotee has expanded himself 1,000 times? It's like in each temple, there might be 1,000 temples, and each deity is an independent personality, but like you said, a person.
Well, he's expanding his material body this many times. The spiritual form is not limited. Spiritual form is beyond time and space. It's on the transcendental platform. So there's not that separation.
Can a pure devotee do more than 9 times, or is that just a yogi?
You're talking about the physical, the material body?
Physical.
But it's not a physical,
What's really physical? The tangible. Just like, I think...
the spiritually physical.
I mean, the tangible, just like we say Prabhupada's body was spiritual. In the same way, the deity, we say that the deity of Prabhupada is also, isn't that Prabhupada sitting?
Well, that's an Archa avatar. You're calling Prabhupada from the spiritual platform to be present within that form.
Yeah.
So that can be done a limited number of times. You see, there's 2 different ways to approach it. One is someone who's in the spiritual world and has a form like Vishnu's. That means he already has his Sarupa Siddhi, where he's in his 2-armed or 4-armed form. So you can't limit that form. It's not. That entity can be simultaneously present. You can communicate with that person. He's on the transcendental platform It's beyond the material limitations. That's one angle of vision. Other angle of vision is even if someone was in the material world, as a pure devotee, but was still not manifesting any type of transcendental opulences like that, but through the super soul, you see, Krishna is present everywhere, so through the super soul, that devotee can understand, just like this electrical, just like telephonic connection. You have a line here and one in Los Angeles. So super soul is in every atom, he's in every heart, he's in the heart of the pure devotee. So if one has direct connection with Krishna, then he would know everything through Krishna. It's just a difference, knowing it from Krishna or knowing it directly. There's no basic difference. It comes out to the same thing. So when we offer our prasadam to the spiritual master, even when people offer the prasad to their ancestors, the ancestors are not pure devotees. In fact, they're offering, they might be in hell. But through the process of mantra and through our meditation, they get the benefit of that prasad offered to them through the super soul. Now the pure devotee is in a totally different situation. But in any case, whichever way it's going through the devotee to Krishna, worship is accepted by Krishna. There's no limitation of the material time or space. It's not that you can only have 10 murtis of Prabhupada, after that just no more expansions allowed. But there's an archa all the time. And specifically is being talked here is when the body expands into 10 different forms. And each form is, just like in sometimes, I forget, there was one yogi was fighting a battle and he divided himself into 10 forms. And each one had a sword and they were fighting like that. I think some demon did that also with Krishna. So that can be done by these yogis. They can expand themselves into different forms, and they're all doing one thing. They're all fighting, or they're all, whatever they happen to be doing. In this case, they're all acting in family activities, sexual activities, whatever. They're all doing one basic activity. This is on a material platform. These are material bodies. The spiritual bodies don't do these type of things. It's not a body, it's a spiritual rupa. You say deho. Deho means body. Sukha sarir and stola sarir. Gross and subtle bodies. A body is a covering. But when you don't find, you say here siddha sarup, siddha rup, the spiritual form. For when referring to the form of the soul, it's not a body. That is the form of the soul. It's like you have the form of your hand and the covering of your glove. So there's a difference. When you're discussing with the coverings, with these bodies, the yogi is able to expand even his physical body up to 8 or 9 times through mystic power. That's called mind over matter. On a far different level than what they're investigating in now modern science. But on the spiritual platform, there's no limitation. If Krishna wants, he can empower a soul to do anything. That's called Shaktavesh. And simultaneously, one can be conscious of what's going on throughout the entire material universe. So Vyasadeva saw simultaneously the material worlds, the spiritual world, everything. He's an individual soul, empowered. So simultaneously, on the spiritual platform, you can see you're not limited. Your every sense is interchangeable, just like Krishna's. There are ultimately some limitation, but an individual soul relative to Krishna, even on the spiritual platform, but that's in specific areas. This wouldn't prove, in either case, but it wouldn't prove a limitation. Either if you consider that directly the spiritual master is present in his deity, or that it's being transmitted through the agency of the super soul. In either case, it's no difficulty.
When the yogi expands in 9 different forms, is it that he still has just one soul, and
Right.
the soul
Soul's not subdividing. The Atma is one.
Now, in the case of a pure devotee who you say has the body of Vishnu and is non-different in that way, does that mean that he becomes all-pervasive as well? I mean,
His body is
or is he just conscious of
like Vishnu. It's not exactly the same.
So does that mean that it's all-pervasive, like when his picture? I mean, does that mean that he's conscious of the picture, or does that mean that he's?
So it means that his picture on the transcendental platform, anything to do with the liberated soul, is connected with him. Even in material world, it's known that physically, that as you come up to the focal point, as you come up to the absolute platform, everything does become one in the absolute. But even within that oneness, there's also variegatedness. Even we find in the ancient cultures, like in South America and the Caribbean, that they take a doll of someone materially and they do voodoo and things, because there's a relation between a form or thought or an object of a person and the person, even in a material platform. What to speak of on the spiritual platform is direct. A picture of the Guru, picture of Krishna is connected.
The spirit soul is described as being 1/10,000 the size of the hair, but is it different when one's on the spiritual platform, or is it that it becomes just conscious?
And that's the size of the dormant soul. When you get your Siddha Sarup, then you have your spiritual form, which is, well, relative to whatever situation you're in. At that time, it's not. Not in that sense. It's all pervasive. Wherever Krishna is, the devotee is there. Simultaneously, the soul can appear in more than one place under certain circumstances and be performing different pastimes. In the spiritual world, huh? That's right.
Just like the deity is looking at us, deity is there, Krishna is there, and he's looking at us. Is it the same way that the spiritual master is there on the altar, in his murti or in his picture, and he's looking at us? Just like the deity and the deities.
Why not?
I've read that it doesn't require a great intelligence to be successful in devotional service, such as was the case with the yogis and the Chet. I've also read that sometimes it's very easy to mistake the weeds that go in the heart for the bhaktavat weeds. It also grows. It's very easy. So how can you understand this? How can you easily get rid of these weeds if mind is so clean?
Therefore, we fortify our intelligence with the words of the spiritual master and the instructions from the Shastras and the teachings from the Vaishnavas. That gives us transcendental intelligence. Just like someone may be a PhD or a doctor or some big lawyer, and he may be very intellectual and very intelligent on that level. And there may be someone who is just like that story you must have heard about the boatman and the scholar. You heard that? No bhakta? You don't tell him these stories. But one might be very simple in terms of material sophistication, but maybe very practically intelligent. So if we have the advice from the spiritual master, they can tell you the story sometimes of the boatman and the scholar. It's on video, I think, even the drama. With that very practical intelligence, you can distinguish what's a weed. Just like a gardener, he's also intelligent, but his may not be very sophisticated in some cases, but is very practically intelligent. So that type of intelligence the devotee has is very practical. It may not be the most sophisticated. It may also be not that they're not also sophisticated already intelligent devotees in that sense, but in general they have a very pragmatic understanding of life, very pragmatic understanding of what's at weed in the spiritual life by having received so many instructions from those spiritual sources. So you should fortify yourself by reading the scriptures, by listening to the classes, by listening to your spiritual master. And this way you'll get more and more intelligence how to avoid the different pitfalls in spiritual life. Yes?
One of the worst things you can do in your devotional career to attend meditation. The worst thing anyone can do.
It's number one.
So even though you need so much advice to attend meditation, your devotional service, and all
Can be. Depends on the gravity of the offense, the elevation of the person you're offending. But for any Vaishnava, it can cause fall down. It's compared with Vaishnava Parad Matal Hati Upare Ba Chinde Tar Sukhi Jayapataka. It's like an elephant pulling out a banana tree right from the root, ripping it out and throwing it down, or any tree. So that means for some time the leaves may stay green, but after some short time they'll become dry and fall out. It's because it's pulled out from the root. I mean, if you cut, it might grow up again. If you cut a tree, sometimes it grows up. You pull it out from the root and just throw it down, then it's called the mad elephant offense. You have to guard from that very carefully. You should never stop seeing the good qualities in Vaishnava. Some quality may become visible which is not so good sometimes. But if a person is a Vaishnava, we should never lose our sight of the good qualities that that person possesses. The bad qualities can be purified. So when a person only starts seeing the bad qualities, not able to see the good qualities, it becomes offensive, then it's very dangerous.
although Prabhupada said told us to stay away from those God brothers when I went to Buddhism, very has mentality to Prabhupada's God brothers.
Pardon?
A lot of Buddhism is very offensive mentality to us Prabhupada's God brothers, even with the Vaishnavas.
You see, sometimes people consider, like if you say that this person shouldn't be listened to, or this person's inimical to Prabhupada, or this person's... So many think that that's not an offense, you see. Sometimes people try to get sympathy, saying just see, because they say don't go to those people, they say don't listen, or they say they're inimical to Prabhupada, or they have... Some cases in the Chaitanya Charitamrita it says anyone who cannot appreciate the good devotional service of another, who's envious of that, is not a Vaishnava. So it doesn't mean that every one of Prabhupada's God brothers is necessarily a Vaishnava. Doesn't mean that every one of our God brothers is necessarily a Vaishnava. They might not have come up to the platform of being a Vaishnava, or they may have fallen down from the platform of being a Vaishnava by their offenses. Normally, no one is going to take a risk of criticizing the spiritual master's brothers. We don't take, this is too big a risk. Socially and Vedically, we just don't do it. It's dangerous. Maybe somebody has that type of insight. They think that, well, this person doesn't show the qualities of a Vaishnava. So, they may say something like that. Other people may just maintain the social structure. They don't say that. Someone may say that later on just for the sake of preaching, because someone, although technically they may not actually be a demon, but they may be acting practically like a demon because they're acting inimical to a preaching, preaching of Krishna consciousness or a preaching movement, which is definitely not the activity that a Vaishnava should or would do. But later on, that person may somehow or another readjust his vocabulary in terms of describing that particular person, or he may have said something like that just to be a little graphic in terms of defending the spiritual life of others. Maybe it was over-enthusiastic in some cases, maybe in other cases it was realistic. But just to get the kind of, attention or sympathy, there are people who they'll try to expose that will just see, how can someone offend a Vaishnava? This all ploys and somehow or another getting people to listen to that other person and ultimately to come into that particular camp, It's not, just like for instance in the Krishna conscious movement, we don't discuss Prabhupada's God brothers, and you brought it up so we're discussing. You see, we have plenty of things we're trying to preach, we're trying to expand Prabhupada's mission that he started, the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We don't have time to just sit around and discuss the bad or good relative qualities of different other people who are not really doing so much in the spiritual activities of spreading Krishna consciousness in this world. But other people, their preaching is based upon somehow identifying with Prabhupada and bringing him into their, and trying to gain some credibility from having some relation with Prabhupada. And then the other way that they have is then by trying to discredit people if they don't accept whoever they're trying to promote. But the basic thing was that Prabhupada was very clear. He wanted that all of the followers of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur should work together. This is his basic stand. We should all work together. If you don't want to work together, if you don't want to cooperate together, alright, then we're separate. So we're going to establish a cooperative movement as the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. If you want to cooperate with that, work together. We have branches all over the world. We got the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Step forward, come on. If you don't want to cooperate, you want to set up your own independent camp, you don't want to follow Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's order to work together, so we don't want anything to do with you. Apart from socially being polite, if you're not inimical, but this is the basic thing. There's no reason that anyone should not cooperate with Srila Prabhupada. This movement is offering the best opportunity in the whole world for becoming Krishna conscious. Hare Krishna.
I've heard that if one offends a Vaishnava, specifically if one offends to a god brother or a spiritual master, then that can oftentimes, that person, the reaction would be his material desires will very much increase. Is that true?
Well, if you have the mercy of Lord Nityananda, that mercy is that you're feeling spiritual ecstasy, and that immunizes you from material attractions. So it doesn't matter whatever Vaishnava. In fact, in the 11th or 11th canto Bhagavatam, it mentions even Uttamadhikari, if he offends the Kanishtadhikari. Say that for some reason a very exalted devotee became envious of a neophyte devotee's sincerity or something like that. Just as it's practically impossible to happen. But in case it were just to happen, even in that case, that a more advanced devotee, just like Lord Ram told Hanuman, that don't be proud and not give that little spider was throwing little pieces of dust, and Hanuman was throwing big boulders. And so Hanuman said, like, get out of the way. And Ram is saying, no, he's working with his full enthusiasm and energy. He's no less than you are. So somehow if a more advanced devotee might consider himself far more exalted than some, say, neophyte devotee, and somehow obstruct the devotional service of the neophyte just out of false ego. Even for that offense you can fall down. What to speak of if you're offending someone more, you see, any Vaishnava. So it's certainly the Vedas say that one should see even one's own godbrother who's more elder and who's more senior, more Krishna conscious, you should see him almost equal with the spiritual master. And the Vedic, that's your own godbrother. And so the godbrother of your spiritual master should normally be respected. It's a spiritual uncle. There's a difference in relationship. And again, Prabhupada clarified in the Adi Lila Part 3 that if somebody is inimical of the devotional service of his godbrother, that it's not a Vaishnava quality. Vaishnavas are not envious people. Materialists are envious people. If a person is a materialist, then you offend them, there's no offense. Or a person is a Vaishnava, but he has a materialistic attitude, and you warn people to avoid that materialistic attitude, that's also not an offense. But one should definitely, from the Vedic social point of view, one should avoid offending the older Vaishnavas or the godbrother of the spiritual master, as one also would avoid offending the spiritual master. And if you do offend anyone, then if you'll lose the mercy of Nityananda, then naturally you're more open for falling prey to sense gratification. This is something that's very difficult for someone else to judge, except for the spiritual master.